Hello and welcome. If you are looking for a very simple and effective timesheet template or a time card template, then you have reached the right place. In this video, I will present a free timesheet template in Microsoft Excel and explain step by step how we can use the template to calculate the number of hours worked. This template has a very simplified data entry. It allows a lot of customizations to the settings and also creates 3 automated reports, which will give the weekly timesheet, bi-weekly timesheet, as well as monthly timesheet. This template is free to download from Indzara.com, and you would need Microsoft Excel installed to use this template. In this video, we will also talk about some of the most common overtime policy settings and how to implement them in this template. Now let's get started. So now I have the template open. This is the info sheet, which provides you the links and resources which would be helpful. And now we go to the settings sheet. This is where we can set up the options and the settings that will drive the timesheets. So first we enter the employee information, and this template is designed to store data for one employee. So if you need for multiple employees, you can create a copy of this workbook, entire workbook, you make another copy and then use it for a different employee. But within the same workbook, we cannot track multiple employees. And we enter the employee information such as name, title, manager name, start date. So this start date is the date from which you want to track the time. So the timesheet, as it's going to track the number of hours worked by the employee. So this start date will tell us from when we need to start tracking time for the employee. And custom field, this is, you can type anything in there and it will automatically come to the timesheets, which we will see shortly. So it can be used for any purpose. And then similarly, we have the company information where you can enter the name. There is another second field for tagline, and then address. And then also another custom field where you can enter anything and it'll get into the timesheets. The third option is to select the weekend. So you can select if in your company you want Saturday and Sunday both to be weekends or just a Sunday. You can just use these options to set them up. And the weekends and holidays can be set different policies, and that's where if you have different policies for the weekends and holidays in terms of time tracking, then you can use these options. Now, the week can begin on a different day, depending on the company and depending on the country. And so we have option to choose when the week begins. And so I've chosen here Monday, but again, you can choose what suits your business scenario. The next option is the holidays. So here I've entered a couple of holidays. So you can enter any number of holidays. These are the days that have been official holidays in your company. So just to add one more date here, I would just do something like this. And then I keep entering one by one, and I will have, I can enter any number of holidays. I'm just going to do undo. And the next set of options are the most fun part, which is where how the overtime rules are decided and set up. And so initially I'm just going to go through at a current setting, and then we'll come back and explain all the different possibilities. So the way it is set up, you have regular, which is at $10 an hour is the pay rate. And then you have the daily limit of 8 hours. So anything over 8 hours will not be regular time, regular pay. And then we also have a weekly limit for the regular. And then second tier of time is the overtime. So anything beyond 8 hours in a day, but up to 12 hours will be counted as overtime, will be paid at $15 a day. And then anything about 12 hours in the day will be paid as double overtime, and that will be $20 an hour. And you can change these dollars and you can change these limits. You can also have only one tier or 2 tiers or 3 tiers. So they're all customizable. And the policy for the weekends and holidays, you can choose one of the 3. If I choose overtime, that means that if it's a weekend or a holiday and if an employee works, then it'll be assigned as overtime and will get paid at the rate of overtime. So in order to keep it very easy to understand what's happening, the template also generates a policy text, which is basically what is the policy that you have set up above. An employee will earn at a regular rate of $10 for the first 8 hours in a day. Employee will earn at overtime rate of 15 for hours worked after 8 hours up to 12 hours in a day. And then employee will earn at double overtime rate of $20 for any work beyond 12 hours in a day. Employee will earn at the overtime rate for hours worked after 40 non-overtime hours in a week. And that's because of the weekly limit of 40 that we have entered. Work done during weekends and holidays will be charged at overtime rate. So essentially, this is the policy that we have set up, and the template will use for calculation of the number of hours and the total pay during the pay period. So please review this and then make sure that this meets the policy in your company before you start using the template. The policy for the 7th consecutive workday in a week. So this is something that I found out that there is a specific policy in the state of California, which so you cannot basically work, if you're working 7 consecutive days in a work week, then you get paid in a different rate. And so this template takes that law and then tries to also customize it. So it doesn't have to be, you can now change it to, if you don't want this policy to be implemented, just choose no. If you want it, you can choose yes. And then you can say for the first 8 hours on that 7th day, I want it to be overtime. After that, it's double overtime. Or you can just say, I just want everything to be double overtime. So it's more customizable for any country, any state to be used. But the origin comes from the idea from the California state law. I think some people call it the day of rest law. So anyway, so this is optional. You can choose no if this doesn't apply to your company. Now we have covered the basic settings. Now we are going to the second stage of the template, which is the data entry. The data entry or the time card entry is very straightforward. We have already, dates are populated for about 366 days from the starting date. So the starting date that we entered, 25th June here, and then the template is already put up all the 366 days. And if in case, let's say I want to do it January 1st, 2018, and now if I go to the data entry, you'll see that it starts from January 1st, 2018, all the way to January 1st, 2019. So that's 366 days of data entry. You can extend this, so you just have to unprotect the sheet with Indzara as password and drag this table down to expand to more days. So you're not limited by any way. You can use this template for any number of days of tracking. You don't have to create a new file every week or every month. You can just use this template forever. So that's the way it is designed. And the first 2 columns are basically calculated fields. So the date and the day will be all automatically calculated. And these 3 columns are where you will be entering the times. So what I've entered here is that on this day, so let me change it back to the date I had before, because we're going to use that example to walk through how the calculations work. So 25th June, the employee came in at 8 a.m., time out at 5 p.m., and then the break time was 1 hour. So in order to enter 8 a.m., so you could just type 8:00 and hit enter. The template will treat that as 8 a.m. To input 5 p.m., you could enter just 20:00. That's 8 p.m. So that's how you can enter the time in and out. And then the break time will be entered as if let's say this is 1 hour 30 minutes, I'll do 1:30. So that's how you can enter the break time. So time in, time out, break time. Break time is not paid. So the break time is the number of hours or minutes that will be subtracted from your paid time. So keep that in mind. Time out minus time in minus any number of hours in the break time the result is the number of hours you worked on that day. The template, this sheet has a few more things. So you can see that the weekends are colored in light orange, and then the holidays are shown in blue. And this is a holiday that we entered in the settings sheet. And then validation errors. So let's say this timeout is 8 p.m. But if I type in timeout as 7 a.m., that's going to now show these red borders, meaning something is wrong. You can't have a time in at 8 a.m. and time out at 7 a.m. And so if your employee is working across the midnight across 2 days, then you have to enter them as two separate entries. So you will finish the first day at midnight and then start the next day again at 12 a.m. And then continue. So that you have to enter them as two separate entries if an employee works across midnight. Okay, so we have those, and then the template has a lot of hidden calculations. So if you choose this and unhide, you will see a lot of calculations. You don't have to do anything on that, but just be aware that if you want to see the formulas, if you want to check everything, they are all calculated, like all the number of hours, like regular overtime, double overtime, the amount of paid and everything. Everything is shown here. And if you're interested, you can. Otherwise, I would just recommend keep it hidden, and you don't have to do anything about it. And editing the formulas obviously would change the logic, could change the logic, and so recommended that you don't edit any of the formulas. That's the data entry portion, and we're done with data entry. Now, as you're entering for each day, you can go to the any of the other three sheets, which are the weekly timesheet, biweekly, and monthly. So we go to the weekly, and here this is automatically populated. The only thing you need to do is to enter the pay period start date. So right now I'm looking at, let's say, 25th June. And so it'll show the 7 days from 25th June in this. This is a weekly timesheet. If I want to change this to, let's say, July 2nd, then that's it. And then you can just, every time when you want to print or save as PDF this timesheet, then all you have to do is to come in and then type the pay period start date, and there you have it. It's a one sheet, but that can be used to create on-demand timesheets for any time period. The data for this is all coming from the data entry sheet. Whatever you entered there will be used to calculate the total pay. This has the company information, employee information you entered there, including the custom fields there you entered. They all come through here automatically. You can also insert logo if you want to insert the picture, and then choose a picture or a logo of your company, and you can just insert it just like in any other Excel file. And the dates, the days, and then if it's a weekend, it'll show W. If it's a holiday, it'll show H. And then the regular number of hours, overtime, double overtime, and the total number of hours. And then it also shows the rate, paid rate, and then the total pay and the total number of hours worked by the employee during that period. So all of those are automatically calculated, and at the bottom you have a couple of signature placeholders which you can use if you're printing and then signing. Then you can use that as well. The biweekly timesheet works exactly the same. The only thing is that it'll be for 14 days, and wherever date you enter here, it'll track for, let's say I do this, it'll automatically calculate 14 days beginning from this date. That's it. There's no other entry. Just put the date in there and everything will be automated. Otherwise, the design is exactly the same as the weekly. It's just that we have more data to show. So we have tried to, change the font size so that it will still print on one page. Monthly, it works exactly the same. You just put the starting, in this case, again, I've entered July 1st. So it shows the entire month of July. It kind of is set up to work. Even if I put July 5th, it'll still show July complete month, because this is a monthly. This will always be a full calendar month. You cannot do like 30 days beginning on July 5th. You're basically saying I'm typing a date, and then that month will be used to populate the dates. And then so we have everything else exactly the same as we had in the previous two timesheets. So just in case of how you can, in terms of how you can use it, you can go and hit file print, and then this allows you to print the on a single piece of paper or single page. So all the timesheets are designed to print on one page. It's already ready to be printed. It's print friendly. And then you can also export these into PDFs by just coming in here and hitting create PDF. You can then create a PDF and then share. We definitely recommend that you, for every pay period, create a copy, export it as PDF, and store separately as reference, because that's always recommended, because the template, if you change the data by any means or by mistake, or if you lose it, then it's always better to actually have a PDF copy of the actual number of hours worked by the employee and the actual pay amounts. Okay, so now we have kind of covered the settings, the data entry portion, and then also the different timesheets automated that you can print and export. Now let's talk about some of the common overtime and then the regular setting scenario, so that you understand how the calculations work. Now the first scenario that we're going to see is if in your company you only have one time set. So I'm going to just delete these, and then we don't need anything. Or the employees get paid at the same rate regardless of how many hours they worked. If that's the case, then you just choose regular. And for weekends, again, I'm going to just choose regular to keep it simple, because we only have one time, right? And you can even change this to regular to something else if in your company you want to call this differently, but it's optional. And then so I'm putting $10. So that means our policy is that the employee will earn at the regular rate of $10, and the work done during weekends and holidays will also be charged at the regular rate. Pretty simple, right? And in this policy, we're going to use the week of 25th June, where we have entered these times, and that's what we're going to see how the calculations work. So every day, the employee has worked these many hours, and you can see all the time is being allocated to the regular time, because we only have one time tier. The total number of hours worked is 77, which brings to $770 of pay. Great. Now, this is the most simple scenario. It's all clean. We don't have to worry about overtime. So now let's talk about the second scenario that we're going to see, where you may have two tiers. So I'm going to just type in overtime, and then we need to provide a rate for this, as well as we need to give when something becomes overtime. So let's say, for example, I do after 8 hours, it'll be overtime. Then that means the employee will earn at the regular rate of 10 for the first 8 hours in a day, and then earn $15 rate for after 8 hours in a day. So let's see now how the calculations work in this scenario. So previously everything was regular, but now you can see that any work done more than 8 hours in a day will automatically go to the overtime column. So here the employee worked 13 hours, so 8 went to the regular and 5 went to overtime. Here it was 9, so 8 and 1. Here it was only 7, so all the 7 will be in the regular. So you can see that now the employee had 61 hours allocated to regular time, and then 16 to the overtime. And here, remember that in this scenario, the seventh day, or in this case the weekend, is being given as regular time, even though it's 14, and that's because in the settings we chose the policy for the weekends and holidays to be regular. If I change the weekend policy to be overtime, then you will see that all the work done on during the weekend will move to overtime. And so this is how the template will use the setting that you chose to calculate correctly the regular and the overtime hours. In this scenario, the employee ends up earning $920 because they get 30 hours worth of overtime, and that is how the pay increased. So now let's look at the third possible or third of the possible scenarios, which is we're going to put a weekly limit. So let's go back. In this case, we had 47 hours the employee worked regular hours time. So if there is a weekly limit in many states, in many countries, there would be. So we're going to put 40 hours. So anything beyond 40 hours in a week, it should be overtime. And so now here I'm going to go to the weekly sheet, and now you will see that the regular is only 40 because automatically anything beyond 40 will move into overtime, and that's how you end up getting more overtime hours. So you can see when I add these, I get 40. And so even though the employee worked 13 hours on Saturday, only one is getting counted as regular hours and the remaining goes into overtime. And that's because the employee has reached the 40-hour limit for the week. And the week is the work week. So the week begins on Monday. That's what we set in the settings. So the week is Monday through Sunday. During the work week, you cannot have more than 40 hours as regular time. Okay, now let's move to the next possible scenario where you have 3 tiers. So we're going to call it double overtime. And then we will put $20 rate. And then in this case, we need to say, when does it become double overtime? So I'm going to put 12 hours. And so this means that the first 8 hours in a day will be regular. 8 to 12 will be overtime. Anything more than 12 will be double overtime rate. And then the weekly limit only applies to the regular. So anything beyond the weekly limit will go into overtime. And now let's go and check how. And then you can now choose whether the weekends and holidays, do you want it to be overtime or double overtime? But I'm just going to leave it as overtime for now. And then I'm going to go into the weekly timesheet. And now you'll see that it automatically populated regular, overtime, and double overtime, all the 3 columns. And then on Tuesday, the employee worked 13 hours. So 8 went to regular, 4 went to overtime, and then the last one went as double overtime. And this is how it'll automatically figure things out based on the daily limits that we have set. And then if we also had the weekly limits, it will make sure that the regular doesn't go beyond 40 because we have a weekly limit on. If we don't, then it can go beyond 40. So the template will mirror or implement what settings that you have chosen. And I'm just using the weekly timesheet to illustrate, but everything in the biweekly also works the same way. You can see they getting populated with 3 columns. The next option you have is if you don't have a weekly limit, that's also possible. So I can just remove it. And now I don't have a weekly limit, and the template now will show more regular hours because there's no weekly limit. Okay, let me put that. So we've covered about 5 different scenarios already. So now the last one I wanted to cover is, or before I go to the last one, I just want to mention that if you don't have any daily limits, let's say, but you only have weekly limits, you can put 24 as the daily limit because that's the number of hours we have in a day. So everything will get counted in the same tier, but you can have the weekly limit. Okay, now the last one I wanted to cover was the 7th consecutive workday policy. So I'm going to just choose yes. And let's see how this works. So now what happens in the last or the 7th consecutive workday, this employee has worked every day, and you can see that here. And then this is the 7th day. So 7th day, now it will follow the 7th day policy. It won't follow necessarily the weekend policy. It'll follow the 7th consecutive day policy because we have chosen yes here. The order is, if you have enabled the 7th consecutive workday policy, then this will trump everything else. This will automatically be implemented, and then the overtime or the weekends and holidays will come second, and then comes the overtime tiers and limits. So this is the sequence in which the rules will be implemented is 7th, weekend holiday, and then the regular overtime tiers and limits. So in this scenario, we have the 7th consecutive workday, and the employee has been working for 7 days consecutively, and that's why this is following the the policy that we have for the 7th consecutive workday, first 8 hours overtime and then 6 hours double overtime. If I want all the time worked on this last day to be double overtime, I can just choose this option. And now I can see that all the 14 hours went to double overtime. Let's try one more thing here. So if you have this scenario, but let's say the employee did not work on the 6th day. Now just again, keep in mind the 7th day, 14 hours went to double overtime. And that's because the employee has been working 7 days. Let's say the employee did not work one of those days. Let's see how that changes, right? So let's say maybe we take the Saturday off. So we're just gonna remove the entries on Saturday because the employee, let's say, did not work on that Saturday. So now you can see that the 7th day is actually not being counted as double overtime. It's being counted as overtime. And that's because there is no 7th day policy in effect because the employee did not work for 7 consecutive days. And this is a weekend, the last day Sunday. And so it's following the weekend policy of overtime. And if I wanted the weekend policy to be regular, I can do that. And now this day will be counted as regular. So you completely control how the calculations are going to be done in this template. And it is designed as flexible as possible to cover as many scenarios as possible, with so many different countries and so many companies having their own policies. So we've done our best to make it compatible with most, and we would like your feedback on if there are some specific policies in your company where this actually worked fine. That'll be great to know. And if there are some scenarios which are not covered, let us know. So that will also help us to improve the template. So given these, I just want to close it out with a couple of questions that we will usually get, for example, the currency. Can you change the currency? Yes, you can. Just select the cells, and then you can go into, or you can press Control-1, and then you get into this, and then you can change the currency to whatever you would like. Similarly, the date format, if you don't want this date format, you can just, again, Control-1, and then change the date format to whatever you would prefer. And then you can change the colors in the template if you don't prefer these colors. All of those are easily changeable. We've not protected those, but if you really want to, look into or any of these sheets which are protected, you can just go and unprotect, enter Indzara as password, INDZARA, hit OK, and that will unprotect the sheets. So very simple, very transparent. So you can look at how this is built. So I hope you find this template useful. And if you find it useful, please share it with your friends and provide your feedback in the comments below. And also like this video and definitely subscribe to this channel if you have not. If you like Excel templates and would like to see more videos on Excel templates, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much for watching.